There it is. It took a second. We Will Rock You, Queen. Jon Macaskill song, his walkout song. You ready to step to the plate?
Do it.
All right, we're going to let that rock a little in the back. Episode 116 of Bono's Health. Here we are, joined by Jon Macaskill. I always mess that up. Jon Macaskill. And he's only a few hours away from me in Colorado Springs. I'm in Superior, Colorado. I believe it's about an hour and a half. I believe if we were to drive, no traffic. And we got to link up soon in person.
That's right.
I just missed you when I connected with our mutual connection there, Teresa Larson. You ended up going to the FBI training like
Sure
a day or two later, right? So I just missed you. But yeah, we are here to talk about Men Talking Mindfulness. Jon is a co-host with your co-host, Will Schneider. He's in New York City, where I'm from. So all sorts of connections and intertwinings. So fun stuff. So tell us, and Jon, I got to introduce you as a retired Navy SEAL, because that's kind of a big part of your story. And I'll steal your elevator pitch of your podcast is what happens when a Navy SEAL and a hippie kind of connect, and that's what we get is Men Talking Mindfulness. So right. Thanks for being here, and excited. Tell us a little bit about season 5 of Men Talking Mindfulness.
Oh man, it's crazy that we're at season 5. We do 2 seasons a year, so we do basically a spring season and a fall season. And season 5 has been nothing but phenomenal thus far. We've had Dr. Jim Doty, the author of Into the Magic Shop. We've had other folks coming on talking about health
Stephen
and wellness.
Kotler was an awesome one.
We did have Kotler. Yep. Kotler was fantastic. Last season we had a lot coming on to talk about hydration, which I know you're a big fan of.
We all should now, guys. Use my link in the description show notes below.
There you go.
For your free samples. Just pay for shipping. Sorry.
Well done. Well, nice plug. Yeah, man. So we've got some great guests coming on. I do have several SEAL buddies who have been on, so it looks as though I'm just having SEALs on the show. That is not the case. It's just fallen out that way this particular season, that we've had 2 or 3 in a row, and we're going to have another one later this season. Yeah, man, it's just started as myself and my co-host Will Schneider jumping on Instagram Live initially, and it's grown since then to a fairly successful podcast. I mean, we're not measuring ourselves against anybody like Joe Rogan or Tim Ferriss, but
big measure.
Have fun. Yeah, we have a lot of fun on the show, and the guests that we bring on share a wealth of knowledge. And then there's a few that Will and I do on our own, where we just do a lot of research prior to the episode, and we just rap on the show. It's a lot of fun. Men Talking Mindfulness.
Yeah, and the fun definitely comes across. I really enjoy. I usually listen to it, but obviously I dove in deep for preparing for this episode. And to your point too, I'm looking back at my most recent episodes. This is 116. I have 115 was a military person, 114 was a military person, and then 110 was a military person. I'm not going to go too far back, but yeah, I know I got a lot of military guys. I think 107 was a military guy too. Yeah, he was. So anyway, without going too far back,
there's a joke about that. I think it's something to the effect of, how do you get a military man to talk about himself? Get him on a podcast.
There you go. It's a very modern joke.
It is.
Well, yeah, and again, you have a pretty incredible story. I would think a lot of folks listening here are civilians, and before I proceed, I did want to just throw out there again, a big thanks to you and all the folks in the military. Again, like I said, we have them on the show from time to time, and it's always a great thing. It's something I've always just admired and been fascinated by it. But it never feels like enough. It feels cliche to just say thank you for your service, but that's kind of the least we can do.
Well, I appreciate that, but I'll also tell you that serving was an honor and a privilege. And I know that sounds cliche too, but I had a lot of fun serving, and I served right next to some of the best this country has to offer. And that includes my wife. I got to serve with my wife at the same team, and that's where we met one another. So I have a lot of good things to say about my military time, and very thankful for that service. myself, the opportunity to serve.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And for anyone listening, we're also we're going to share the deep dark secrets here. We're in the Whoop group.
That's right.
That our Teresa Larson there got us connected in there, and some interesting stories about Jon getting thrown into our little chat there. And I still don't know who this was. A Dale. For anyone who isn't familiar with the Whoop, the maximum score you can get is 21.0, and even if you ran like for 24 hours in a row, you don't even get a 21.0. People have done this, and this guy Dale, I think last week, average strain was 19.9, which is like,
yeah.
I don't think I've ever even gone above like a 17 in a day. Like, and I'm a pretty active dude. I mean, I don't do as much cardio, but yeah, that's mind boggling. And there's some other people you guys got in there. It feels like, what's the point? What's the point of competing? Isn't
Yeah, I've started getting to the point where I try to compete on the recovery and the sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a few weeks where I kind of won on some of those. Like, and for the one that doesn't show you for the month, and that really bothered me, because I think in August or something, or maybe July, I was like, it was day like 30 of the month, and I'm like, I'm gonna make it, I'm gonna win, and then it doesn't even say, it acknowledges the weekly winners, but not the monthly winners. I was gonna be like, I want my trophy, my fake little message trophy. Speaking of all that, I did want to just quickly shout out another cool thing you have going on. In 2 weeks from now of recording this, we're in October 3rd. Recording this, you're doing a half Ironman competition. Navy SEAL versus, is he an Army Ranger or just Army?
He is an Army artillery officer, retired Army artillery officer.
There you go. And that's raising money for Warrior Rising, a charity. Right. So if we'll try to get that link somewhere below as well, so anyone here can donate to that. Very cool to have been following that. How's the training going for that? You feeling confident going into that?
I am feeling confident. I will admit I'm tired. It takes time. I've got 3 little ones, and I'm an entrepreneur, so my day was pretty maxed as it was, and then adding between 1 to 5 hours depending on the day and depending on what's required for the race. It takes a lot of training. So I'm ready to go back to something more, I don't want to say normal, because then that may offend some of your listeners.
Manageable.
Yeah,
manageable.
Exactly. Something more manageable.
Yeah, I'll tell you real quick. I wasn't a triathlete, I should say. I did a bunch of sprints and Olympic distance. I signed up for one half Ironman out in Montauk, Long Island, and I got out there, and my ride, and this is one of the things for anyone who's ever lived in New York City, to have your bike and all your stuff for triathlon, you need like 700 bags. It's a lot of stuff that you leave in the transition area. So to take Metro North and a train, because you tend not to have a car. So I was able to get someone with a car, but then they had like an emergency thing. So I was like, I guess I have to switch to Olympic distance. I can't do the half Ironman. Oh, darn. That was my one time to do half Ironman. But shortly after that, they did the first ever New York City Ironman that only lasted, I think, 1 or 2 years. I think it actually only lasted that 1 year, because it was the most expensive Ironman in the world for registration. I think it was like $1,200 or something.
Wow.
One of the volunteers from the first one gave me their spot for the next year. So I did sign up. I went and I signed up for the full New York City Ironman. And it was like $1,200. And as soon as I did it, and at the time I didn't have kids, I wasn't super busy with work. I had a pretty flexible life. And I was like, just realizing, holy shit, I need to train like 4 hours a day for this thing, even though I have like a year. Luckily, they canceled it like the next day, gave me a full refund because there were so many complaints and logistical nightmares. Even though it was the New York City Triathlon or Ironman, there were just so many crazy things, because it went over the George Washington Bridge and part of New Jersey. And it was just so difficult to set up. In New York City and even New Jersey is just an animal of a logistical nightmare. So luckily for me, I felt pretty relieved to be like, I don't have to commit 4 hours like a day to train for this thing. So yeah, it was pretty cool. Again, I still train a little bit myself with the swimming, and I try to I'll run an hour and be like, I can still do that. I can keep going for like 2-3 hours. It's fine.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at. And you're 44, so I'm very curious. And you said you used to do Ironmans or just triathlons?
I've done a half Ironman in the past, but it was when I was much younger and in a different standard of fitness.
Yeah.
I still consider myself in a decent shape for being a father of young kids, and again an entrepreneur. And but not where I was at one point.
But it's not dad bod. You're not dad bod.
Yeah. Well, what is Andy, my buddy that I'm racing against? He says it's not dad bod, it's a father figure.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Or the old joke is like round's a shape. I'm not in shape, but round's a shape or whatever. Yep. So that's pretty awesome. I did want to ask you real quick, you don't have to speak for the entire military, but some stuff that's come out recently is how many folks are not able to even pass the basic physical requirements these days of what the military requires through all the branches, I think. And I'm sure each branch has a slightly different take on it. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on just the physical demands before we get into the mental demands, which that's going to be a fun one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I haven't kept tabs on what the physical demands are since I retired 2 years ago. So I retired in August of 2020. I do know just before I was getting out, they were starting to transition the Navy's physical fitness assessment, the PFA, which it used to be called the physical readiness test, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, they took the sit-ups out of it and had started to put the plank into it. I'm not sure how that went over because I got out just as COVID, was starting to peak, and they had nixed the PFA for the spring of 2020, and then I got out. So I'm not sure how that is going over. I honestly haven't kept tabs on it, but I will say that there's a lot more sitting around in the military than there used to be. And I don't necessarily say that in a bad way. There's a lot more sitting at a desk, a lot more administrative. From when I first came into the military, it was the more senior folks who spent a lot more time on computers and emails. Now everyone is expected to be on email and on their computer. So I think it's almost like the cross section of society writ large. If you look at society writ large, we've all gotten in worse shape because most of us spend more time in front of our computers, phones, screens, in our cars than we used to 20, 30 years ago. And I don't know that that's necessarily the military's fault. It is just the way of things being in the way they are in society. Now, that's not to say that they're right either. People need to take ownership. And even if you have a job where you sit at a desk all day, which, I do a lot these days, but I'm still able to train for a half Ironman. If you make it a priority, you can stay in shape. If you make it a priority, you can eat well, make your meals beforehand. You can actually set yourself up for success in an environment that is more difficult to succeed, but you just have to set yourself up mentally to be successful physically.
Yeah, and I just had Rob Wolf on, if you're familiar with him, kind of formerly the paleo guy in the world, and he's kind of moved away from that, and he was the keto guy also at some point, but he's actually the founder of Drink LMNT. Another plug. Hit my link down below. But the quote I will attribute to him from his book, I believe Wired to Eat, or I've heard him say a few times, is it's not your fault that you're out of shape or whatever. Like his whole book, Wired to Eat, is saying how we are like fighting this modern life. But it is your responsibility, to your point. So that's where I think, again, whether we want to call it personal responsibility, I think there's some political things around there, whatever we want to call libertarianism at that point. I don't know. But yeah, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And I have to say that to a lot of clients when they start, coming back at me with like, oh, but this is difficult or it's not, against, trying to put blame on things. And I think that takes us into kind of this whole concept of mindfulness. And again, I just finished listening to one of your podcasts where you describe really in depth, and I'll try to have that link below as well, of Operation Red Wings, which a lot of people are going to know from the movie Lone Survivor with Mark Wahlberg. Right. And anyone in the CrossFit space probably knows because of the workout Murph, which is done every Memorial Day in the CrossFit space, pretty much in every CrossFit gym, box, whatever you want to call it, around the world. I've certainly done that workout quite a few times in my life. And named after Lieutenant Michael Murphy, who was featured in that movie. And it was pretty crazy hearing your story. And I don't want to take your words out of your mouth, but in terms of the fact that you kind of felt like you were supposed to be one of the guys there. And the fact that you were like, I have a bad feeling about this,
Right.
a la Star Wars. And you know, you ended up kind of still being a part of that mission, but you know, there's definitely a lot there. And then you talk about, and I'll throw it back to you after this, but of how kind of dealing with kind of the trauma from that led to, along with the whole situation with your brother-in-law, with and kind of learning from that, how that ultimately led you to say kind of to the mindfulness space and
Yeah.
becoming a Navy SEAL hippie, if you will. But you know, it's a pretty cool story. I just wanted to give it like a quick 30-second elevator pitch, because I feel like you've told that story so many times, and folks can go check out his podcast as well, where you guys talk about that. But yeah, that I'd love to hear a little bit of your take on it. Without, you know, I just didn't want you to go through all the
Yeah, no, I appreciate
the
it.
ins and outs.
I'll keep it short. Yeah, you covered a good bit of it there. Red Wings, Operation Red Wings was in June of 2005 in Afghanistan. It is covered in the book and the movie Lone Survivor. But the long and the short of it is we sent a reconnaissance element out to observe a target for between 24 and 72 hours. The reconnaissance element was compromised by some goat herders. There was an ethical dilemma on what to do with these goat herders. Should we let them go? Well, that's a tough one, because they may go tell the villagers down below what's happening. Should we kill them? Well, you can't really do that, because they're non-combatants. They are non-combatants. And should we tie them up? You can't really do that, because they're most likely going to end up dying anyway, or they're going to be seen as missing, and then they may send out a search party from the village. So really the only answer that it could do, only thing that they really could do, was let them go. And of course, they went straight down the hill and tell the villagers what's happening, that there's quote unquote soldiers up on the hill. And they sent up the Taliban fighters and end up engaging the reconnaissance element. 3 of the 4 end up dying, including Michael Murphy. Marcus Luttrell was the lone survivor. Matt Axelson and Danny Dietz were the other 2 that were killed on that ground element. And then they called for support, and a quick reaction force responded. And the first helicopter of that quick reaction force was shot down, and lost another 16 men in that helicopter, both Army Night Stalkers from the 160th Special Operations Air Regiment and Navy SEALs. And coming back to your comment, that I had pushed back against that mission quite vehemently, and was told that I wasn't going to be on it. And then all hell broke loose and went to hell in a handbasket. And that caused me a lot of depression and anxiety and stress and survivor's guilt and imposter syndrome and whatever else. And I self-medicated with alcohol and prescription medication, and then ended up going to a much darker place in my life. And finally, a counselor recommended meditation to me. And again, the long story short is that actually saved my life. The meditation allowed me to process a lot of what I've been carrying with me, and allowed me to unload a lot of that. So the proverbial pack that I'd been carrying, I was able to set down and leave it behind, or at least lighten the load. So I feel that meditation not only changed my life for the better, but literally saved my life. And as you've probably heard me say on my podcast, I feel that it's an obligation now to pay it forward to anyone who will listen. So that's why I teach meditation, and that's why I have the show Mindfulness, Men Talking Mindfulness. Really, that's why I talk about it as often as I do, because I think if I can save one other person, then it's worth me doing this quote unquote hippie stuff, right? So.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing all that. And in terms of the mindfulness practice, again, I think, if people are on the fence about it, if they've tried it and it's like, yeah, it doesn't really work for me. And there's, I think I heard you kind of allude to it, or kind of the famous saying is, if you don't have, 5 minutes to meditate, you need to take an hour to meditate, or whatever that saying
Right.
is like,
yep.
The more you think you don't need it, the more you probably do need it. And
Right.
Obviously there's tons of research coming out about the physiological benefits of truly practicing that. And just kind of going into it real quick, do you want to go into a little bit of which type of meditation, transcendental, or there's all these different types, if you want to go into a little bit of what you practice or preach, or just, I think I also, again, don't want to put words in your mouth, but just get started with anything, whatever works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think experimentation with mindfulness or meditation is imperative. So, you know, going back to the doctor who recommended it to me, I thought that I could jump right into an hour-long meditation, and it didn't last more than about 17 seconds. And then got very frustrated. And I went back and I spoke to him and told him that the meditation was a bunch of baloney. And then he asked me what I'd been doing, and he kind of showed me how I could start in a different way. You know, I didn't have to start with an hour-long meditation. I could focus on my breath for 2 or 3 minutes. And that's a mindfulness meditation where you're focused on an anchor such as your breath. The transcendental meditations work for some people if they have a mantra that they want to use, you know, a mantra that they're able to focus on. That's their anchor. Whatever you use, whether it's a mantra, whether it's your breath, whether it's a body scan, whether it's, we did a retreat recently and we lit a candle and we allowed people to just keep their eyes open and looked at the flame. And that was their focus point. If you're able to focus on something, then you're going to be successful. Now, mindfulness and meditation are often used interchangeably, and they're not necessarily the same thing. There are such things as mindfulness meditations. Again, that's kind of what I was talking through. But you can also be mindful in your everyday conversation with friends, with family. You can be mindful as you're driving to and from work. You can be mindful when you sit down and eat a meal. That's being mindful. Mindfulness is really nothing more than paying attention to the here and now, the physical and the emotional, without any judgment. That's mindfulness. And you can live mindfully. You don't have to meditate. Now, as you live mindfully, meditation is going to come more naturally. And as you meditate, mindfulness or living mindfully is going to become more natural.
Yeah, and that's a great way to I think about it. And my wife and I actually taught, she's a sex and relationship therapist. So on the relationship side, we would work with healthy couples, and we did a little course where I would teach them some physical stuff they can do together in terms of like smashing, partner mashing and massage kind of each other, and kind of from a Kelly Starrett kind of place, if you're familiar with him, and and Teresa Larson, who and she taught with him and all that. But and then on the kind of mindfulness side, the relationship side, the mental side that my wife covered, we would bring in fruits and things like that, and we would have the couples kind of share a strawberry, and just, again, what are the tastes, what are the sensations, and that kind of stuff to slow it down. So really simple stuff that, again, we generally eat 3 meals a day, and we probably never at all, again, that's a problem with our society, whether you're doing it when you're watching TV or just all these different things you can do to change how your body even digests. And some people say, hey, make sure you chew every bite 20 times or whatever the little change is. There's all sorts of cool ways we can incorporate this stuff into life. And that's something I incorporate as well into my physical therapy practice. Everyone I work with, and having worked for a long time now, I'm not going to say how old I am, although I've mentioned it many times, but catching up to you. I'm going to catch up to you. John's 44. I'm 38, but I'm almost 39. It's fine.
I'm actually 45.
That must have been, I was thinking when I did my research, I'm like, it's very possible that was going to happen. And there we are. I was wrong.
Good.
Should have double checked it. So 45 years old. But the big thing in my physical therapy practice, I was saying, is, over 90% of people I have assessed breathe what I would call incorrectly.
Sure.
Just the mechanics of it, and not even being able to access their diaphragm and get into the belly breathing. And so I almost think of breath work and just that kind of exercise, whether it's crocodile breathing, which is a fun one when you lay face down, or any version of breath work, even just nasal breathing, and just focusing on that. I always think of that as an intro to meditation. And as people get a little more comfortable with it and confident with it, I kind of tell them, like, hey, if meditation is something you've been thinking about or you've tried before and failed with, or how people think about it, I say that this is, now that we're doing this breath work, I think it's a nice gateway drug, so to speak, to get you into this kind of meditative state. And one thing I'll throw out to folks is, what are we trying to battle? Racing minds, right? And just living in this modern world. All these little tools, like we're saying, is when you're eating, just focus on eating. No distractions. Turn your phone off. No TV. All that stuff. But going back, our natural ways of things that we figure out as humans is, people would count sheep to go to sleep, and that was to distract them from the racing minds, and also just enough of that repetitiveness. And as you count sheep, you're not counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You're counting like 1 sheep, 2 sheep. And as you guys do your kind of intro and outro breath work or practice, I don't want to get the name wrong, but it is kind of that concept there. And again, even looking at religion, there's a lot of chanting. There is a lot of kind of even singing together as a group in a lot of kind of church environments. A lot of that ritual has to do with the physiology of kind of taking you out of that overly excited state. And it just is an easy way that we've known for so long. The monks do it, every kind of, it's all there. And we're just trying to figure out how to take it from these kind of what seems like these kind of weird parts of the world to some of us in the modern world. And it's like, how do we integrate that? And like you said, are we hippies because we focus on our breathing? Maybe. And I think we have to be okay with that. But yeah, I really appreciate that. Again, the way you guys talk about it is phenomenal. So I did want to ask, is it the Men Talking Mindfulness? Obviously you guys are 2 guys, but have you found that you mostly have male listeners because of that?
Yeah, it is about 70% of our audience is men, or at least identify that way. But we do have several women that have admitted that they listen, and we see the analytics. And we also have men and women on the show. So it is called Men Talking Mindfulness because of how it originated. It literally was just myself and Will talking to one another about meditation, about mindfulness. And then we grew from there, and we wanted to bring it to more than just men. Now we do still try to bring it to men, primarily because men are stubborn and they don't accept these practices as readily as most women. And we feel that if we are able to bring it to men in a non-threatening way, then they're more likely going to actually take it on and start practicing. So it is still Men Talking Mindfulness. It is still primarily for men, but we also address topics that are for all genders. So we think it's important that everyone listens. It's for men and those who love them. So that's everyone.
100%. Yeah, and I've I don't know how you feel. And again, I'm sure you've talked about it in a previous episode. It wasn't in my most recent episodes I've listened to, but the concept of men's groups. And again, I belong to one, and I'm in the process of switching to a different one for various reasons. But I've had Dan Doty, who was one of the founders of Everyman, without the second E. They had to spell it differently for whatever website or copyright stuff. And then Lee Povey, who has Maximize Your Potential is his organization. But yeah, they both have been on this podcast and talked about that and the concept of men's groups. So I don't know how you feel about men's groups. If that's something, again, I'm pretty sure you guys have covered it. I just wanted to throw it back at you on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we haven't covered men's groups specifically on the show. We're just covered being part of some type of group. Whether that's for accountability, I mean, like our Whoop group, right? I mean, we have that Whoop group going, and we hold one another accountable to making sure that we're working out, or, if the strain isn't where it should be, or the recovery isn't where it should be. That's an accountability group. There's importance to belonging to that. It's not just social importance. It's physiological, mental, spiritual. It's all tied in to belonging to some type of tribe. Now, that said, I am tied to several men's groups, just small little mastermind groups. And we've never identified, hey, look, this is just for men. We've never said that. It's just, that's how it's played out. We've got, several text groups that I'm a part of where we support one another and share workouts, share, books that we're reading, those types of things. so that we hold one another accountable for, again, the physical side, but also mental, spiritual, those other sides of being a human being. And again, it's just naturally kind of fallen out that those two groups that I'm a part of are all men, but it's not by design.
Oh, yeah, I won't judge on it. The other thing I want to make sure we touched on is the fact that in your story of how meditation kind of saved your life is it got you off of all your medications that the system kind of put you onto. And again, that medication path generally does not lead to great places. I just had one of my old CrossFit competitor teammates, Brooke Seam, who published a book called May Cause Side Effects about getting put on antidepressants at the age of 15. And at the age of 30, she kind of went on this journey of getting off of them. And so a lot of people do get put on medications to deal with the symptoms at hand, and very few plans of dealing with the root cause, which is what it sounds like you kind of had to address. So it's one of the big messages I talk about in kind of my lifestyle coaching, health coaching, physical therapy stuff of I want you to get off of any medication you're on now. And I also want to make sure we don't get in a situation where, most humans, especially in America, are going to be on a number of medications by the time they're every year that goes by, the chances are increased. The last statistic I'll throw out is, I believe it's worse now, but maybe back in right before COVID, only 11% of Americans were considered metabolically healthy based on 5 different metrics of generally accepted health. So the other way to say that is 89% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So kind of going back to that concept of, we asked about the military entrance exams for physical capacity and things like that. So there's definitely problems there. I think they're all well recognized, and there's many different ways we can go there. But I want to come back to, coming off meds. If you can talk a little bit about that concept. And when I had Brooke on, I didn't want to just say, hey, couldn't you breathe it out? To get off the meds. But, she talks about her journey. Her book is very, she's an excellent author. Her book is very, very easy to read. It's a very quick read. She's an excellent author. I highly recommend it for anyone who has anyone going through or is on antidepressants or considering going on antidepressants or getting off of them. It's a very, very important, I think, book to get. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about your use of mindfulness to get off of your medications.
Yeah. So I was on various forms of both anti-anxiety and antidepressants, and trying to remember exactly what I was on when I started meditating, because I'd gone through the various, you name it, I had been on it. So when I met with the counselor, he acknowledged that I'd been on them for too long, because like you said, it's kind of, hey, it's the easy button. One, and there are times when they can be positively effective, but the long run for most of them, they're not supposed to be used for life, right? And he acknowledged that I'd been on them for too long, and he said, let's try to get you off of them. And my anxiety instantly spiked, because I was now I was being told that I was going to come off of these meds. And I've also heard the horror stories of coming off of anti-anxiety antidepressants, right? You're supposed to wean yourself off. Some of it's really difficult. But
and I'll just jump in real quick about Brooke's story. She goes pretty in depth as best she can of her experience of how certain medications do stay in your body a lot longer because of the half-life of it. So some of them, affected her for months as she tried to wean off. But there was definitely some mismanagement of that. And again, just real quick from the systemic piece that I wanted to highlight is the fact that, again, when you're getting put on these, there is very rarely a plan of, let's try this for 2 months. And if it, then we can, they'll just say adjust the dosage, I guess. But in terms of the goal is to get you off by a certain time and not just have you on again. She was on it for over 15 years, her whole adult life. So that, and it was a tough decision for her to get off. So sorry, back to you.
No, you're good. So what he recommended was that I do wean myself off, and it was going to be under his kind of guidance. So I continued to go back to him every week and check in with him and let him know how the meditation was going. And as I spent more time with him, I was able to see the effects of the meditation. And then he would say, okay, well, are you comfortable with me changing the dosage? And this time changing the dosage didn't mean increasing, but rather reducing. And then he recommended, again, coming back to your half-life, okay, rather than taking it every day, let's take it every 2 days. Because, this particular medication that I was on, where the half-life, it wouldn't affect you if you were off of it for 2 days. And so then we gradually weaned me off that way. And now I'm not on anything. And as far as antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, I actually feel better because of that. And the anxiety, I can still have anxiety. I can still have depressing episodes, but I don't feel that I'm a depressed person or an anxious person. I believe that the episodes don't define me. Now, the medication did help with those episodes, but it also killed any sense of joy, killed any sense of desire, whether that's romantic desire or desire to progress in my life. I just felt like I was kind of this empty shell of a person that I had been before, and no longer truly Jon Macaskill. So the medication, it helped to a point, but I think ultimately it caused more problems than it solved. And I believe that meditation with the T is better in addressing those problems, those root causes, and then helping me to process the depressing episodes or anxiety-inducing episodes.
Yeah, and another one of my podcasts that I don't mean to just keep using my podcast as reference points, but I'm pretty proud of some of the guests I've had on, and it's an organization, nonprofit up in Maine called Physiology First, and I'll give him credit there, David Bidler, of we want to focus on skills over pills, and they're actually kind of attacking this at the upstream level, if you will, in the high schools, where everyone's getting ADHD diagnoses and getting put on ADHD medications. And so skills over pills they literally teach people how to breathe. And I'm sure a lot of people are much more familiar with Andrew Huberman now, Huberman Lab, who's a neuroscientist out of Stanford University. He's got a very cool podcast channel. And so he talks about it, and I heard him, he was the first one I heard say this, was before you give a driver's license to a kid, maybe you should give them a breathing license. Like, they need to pass this competency of being able to breathe and control your own physiology, so that when someone cuts you off in traffic, and again, I've heard you talk about a recent story where, your wife's car was stolen. Was it Bumblebee?
Yeah.
And just that ability to say, like, again, all the cliches of like woosah, but at the same time, it's like having the right mindset of either someone cuts me off in traffic, and again, you displayed, I think, some of that, whether we want to call it empathy or just evolved thinking or whatever it is, of like, you didn't even want to press charges because they're like, these guys are just, they kind of went the wrong path, and I feel bad for them, and I want to do something to help them out, and not just, put them into the system that's probably not going to serve them the same way. So that ability to think in those situations, and again, I heard you guys talk about it, the Buddhist principle of separating stimulus from response, and really being able to shut down our lizard brain, reptilian brain, to think a little higher level through some of these concepts, and like, what's the real impact here? Again, when someone cuts me off, I can be angry, I can punch a wall, whatever, stuff that you're talking about, or I can say, hey, like, maybe they're having a bad day, like maybe their wife's going into labor, whatever the thing is. But being able to separate that is such a powerful tool. I mean, it's definitely been one of my greatest skills that I think we all will always have to continue to work on all that stuff, because
for sure.
And that's kind of my last question for you is, I'm having our first kiddo in a few weeks. So I know you are father of three. So, and one of my old sensei from when I was growing up just chimed in that his daughter has anxiety attacks occasionally, and they actually realized that caffeine was the culprit. And that is something that a lot of, again, humans just use. We're very bad at self-soothing. And again, as you alluded to in your many stories of, relying on alcohol, again, medications, caffeine being overly done, and we rely on these things rather than saying, like, hey, like, who am I on my own without all this stuff? So my last question, I think, for you, and I want to be respectful of your time, is about parenting. and just, I guess at this point, I'm asking for all the parenting advice I can get, because I hear it's quite a journey. So I'm going to ask for your best possible father advice, parenting advice, whatever it is. And you have a scary story as well. I mean, again, I don't want to keep telling all your stories about your daughter having a tumor in the womb, and just feeling helpless in those situations. So definitely, like, I appreciate you sharing those stories and hearing these kinds of stories, to prepare for all the different possibilities, and just having that mindset to be able to handle some of these, the craziness of parenthood.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, what do we have? 5 minutes? Yeah, definitely not going to fit it all in 5 minutes. But I mean, you've mentioned some good ones already. Being able to breathe and teach people to breathe. That's a great one. As a parent, breathing and taking a step back and not allowing that stimulus to affect the thought, the emotion, and the action. Which, sometimes those stimuli are coming at you multiple at a time from the kids. And then teaching them to breathe when they get upset about something, taking them a second and just taking them and breathing with them. I think that's a great thing. We've done that with our children, and I know Teresa has done it with hers, and we've definitely seen growth in them, and we see a calming effect in them. It's fantastic at that, and that is a tool, as we've already life lesson that they can apply later in their lives, whether that's later as children or later as students or later as adults, whatever, later themselves as parents. So I think that's probably one of the biggest ones that gets missed quite often is breathe.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that and adding fuel to my fire when I talk to my wife and I'm like, hey, we got to do some breathing practice
There
right
you
now. So again, I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate you sharing that.
Of course.
I'm going to keep accumulating parenting advice from most of my guests, I think, are parents. So I got to go back and ask a few that I haven't asked when we had not yet announced things publicly. But
congrats, by the way.
Thank you. Appreciate it. And it's exciting stuff. But
anxiety inducing stuff talking about.
I'm gonna breathe as I'm gonna do some box breathing as you give us places where folks can reach out to you, find you, and anything else you want to promote.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the podcast is Men Talking Mindfulness, and that can be found on mentalkingmindfulness.com or any of the typical podcast platforms. And then you can find me on jonmacaskill.com, or on LinkedIn is the social media that I use mostly. And that's just, again, Jon Macaskill, Macaskill. So love to connect with you, answer any questions that you may have, or be of service in any way. So thanks for the opportunity, Bo.
Appreciate it, John. And one more time, I really do appreciate the service to this country. And, the cliche that freedom is not free is really, every time I say it or do one of those hero workouts in CrossFit, it definitely is a pretty important reminder of those facts. And it's just always an honor and privilege to be able to speak with someone who had the honor and privilege to serve this country. So, and I'll tell the last story I'll tell is the closest I was to maybe enlisting was my college freshman roommate. Kind of had trouble with finance and stuff like that, and decided to switch to becoming a Marine. And I went down to Paris Island for his graduation and walking around the barracks and everything like that. I think the thing that got me was the bathrooms with no doors. I was like, I don't know. Like it is that glory in movies and TV and things like that of like, man, that like seems like the right thing, and like you feel that honor and everything. I don't know, but yeah, facing the reality of it is definitely a different story. And I definitely have a lot of great friends in the military, active and former, and we didn't even say one of my favorite movies of all time that I could probably quote the rest of the time here is The Rock, and that was one of your biggest influences. I haven't heard that one as much from military folks. I usually hear Top Gun and things
Full
like that. Now
Jacket.
Top Gun 2, Full Metal Jacket. I hope not Full Metal Jacket. Ooh, I don't know. That's not one for anyone who knows how that ends. But yeah. Anyway, we'll sign off. Hope folks got 1% better today listening to this. I know I did. And if you got anything out of it, share it with at least one person. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a rating, review, all that good stuff that helps us grow. And all that, signing out.